Plant tissue culture. Tissue culture involves the use of small pieces of plants which are cultured in a nutrient-rich medium under sterile conditions in order to replicate a given plant rapidly. Using the appropriate growing conditions for each X-plant type, plants can be induced to rapidly produce new shoots and, with the addition of suitable hormones, new roots. Plant tissue culture may be used for genetic modification of a plant or simply to increase yield of production. The plant cells can be genetically altered to produce plants with a desirable characteristic, such as size, potential, and genetic immunities to pest and disease. This technique uses the plant's ability to rejuvenate tissues rapidly. I chose to focus more on the production side rather than the genetic modification, just because it interests me personally. The Philodendron spiritus sancti is a critically endangered species as a result of habitat loss and poaching. There's currently only 6 known wild spiritus sancti specimens. As a result of its prized value, cultivated plants span the globe in private collections because of the diligent work of nurseries and hobbyists who have propagated and distributed their plants. In recent years, as the hobby has blossomed into a mainstream interest, Philodendron spiritus sancti have also become the focus for breeding and tissue culture. While there was the first documented successful pollination of Philodendron spiritus sancti and fluorescens that set seed this year, the current wide availability of the plants is thanks to the work of tissue culture labs in Indonesia and China. The plants are currently being produced via TC are exact clones of the mother plant, unlike that of Rhaphidophora tetrasperma. The plants are seemingly identical to the holotype. The successful production of these has taken most of the stress off wild populations and has helped alleviate the potential of poaching by making them relatively accessible through legal and ethical avenues. I am fortunate enough to own not only a plant through tissue culture, but also one from seed from the first batch of domestically produced plants, and an original clone from a well-known botanical garden research institution in Florida, and they are all seemingly identical. On the left, you can see the original clone. This is a wild collected plant that's been grown in Florida for a couple of years now. And on the right is the tissue cultures specimens, but there's a size discrepancy, but you can see how they're incredibly similar. And when they're about the same size, they look identical in person. The Rhaphidophora tetrasperma is another plant that's often produced via tissue culture. It loosely resembles the holotype despite their attempts to create exact clones, which is ultimately the purpose of tissue culturing a plant. The discrepancies include a narrowed leaf shape, blue-silver hue, which is often referred to as a glaucous form of a plant. The leaves are comparatively really thin, and they have poor growth rates compared to the original species. Here you can see the non-tissue culture plant on the left and the tissue culture plants on the right. Both of these plants are grown in identical conditions. They're side by side in a large nursery in Fort Worth. You can see the ones on the right are way more of a blue/silver hue. The fenestrations, which is like the cutouts in the leaves, have a different shape. You can see they're more prone to ripping and tearing. Just overall, they don't closely resemble their original species that they're supposed to be, yet they're sold as the same exact plant under the same name with no caveat that they're different. Benefits of tissue culture include there's increased availability of the specific species, especially commercially, that can prove to be helpful, which then alleviates demand for wild collected specimens, which with a lot of tropical plants, especially deforestation and poaching is becoming real big issues, as there's just not enough room to have so many different plants. Often it also reduces the cost when thinking about the plants commercially. For a collector's point of view, it's obviously a benefit to have something that's more economically friendly. This is my personal view. Is it truly responsible for collectors and sellers to represent tissue culture plants as true species? Technically, they're supposed to be a direct clone of the mother plant and be genetically identical, but in many instances, such as Rhaphidophora tetrasperma, the plants produced may display characteristics that are not held by the original species. From my personal standing as an avid arid collector and a seller, these inconsistencies pose an issue because it creates instances where the lines are blurred between otherwise distinct species, and I believe that plants produced through tissue culture should be given their own cultivar, which is a variety of plant that's been produced in cultivation by like selective breeding or genetic modification, allowing concrete lines to be drawn and distinctions to be made when looking at any particular plant so they're not to be confused with the original species.